Oh, not again. Hello, 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 and welcome. I don't know why it's done this to me. A few moments ago, maybe it's just my end. I don't know. Um, a few moments ago, I had a perfectly good picture. Maybe it's still perfect. I've got a little indicator one over here that looks good, but the one I'm looking at is messed up. It's all Blah. Anyway, hello, good to see you. We'll figure it out as we go, as I always do with these things. Good to see you. Let me know if the picture looks clear to you. I can live with fuzzy on my end. In fact, I'm probably happier with funny, fuzzy on my end. So here, let me turn on the comments. All right, go away. Don't want that. All good there. Okay, well then we won't worry about it too much. I'm glad to hear it. Anyway, so rumors of my death were much exaggerated, as Mark Twain once allegedly said. Not that anybody thought I was dead, but it's been a rough few months, and it was especially bad for a couple of weeks there. But thanks to modern medicine and various other things, but mostly modern medicine, I'm feeling much, much better. In a nutshell, I had one of my inflammatory things, which is a common thing for me. I have a very reactive inflammatory response, and I'm used to that. And it's a normal thing. But for some reason, it just went haywire this time. Worst I've had it in 30, 35 years. Got really, really difficult to deal with. Every joint, all my muscles, everything just really in bad shape. And then on top of it, just week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I got a pinched nerve in my neck. Again, not anything in and of itself very exciting. It was kind of more like the sort of thing that anybody gets if they spend too long watching TV with their head tipped to one side or reading a book at an odd angle or whatever. But it just went nuts, and the whole my head, my neck, my back, everything was just locked up. I couldn't get up out of a chair easily. Oh, there. Okay, my picture came back into focus. All kinds of weird stuff, and I finally said, "Okay, enough is enough. I've got to just go and deal with this now." Because bless them, my doctors had been. I had recently changed medical providers, and so these were all new doctors. They wanted to make sure I wasn't just I don't know what they wanted to make sure, but just trying to make sure they were treating me properly. So they were making me go through the whole thing, and I've gone through all these things for many years, and go to a rheumatologist and have blood tests and X-rays and all that stuff. And I kept telling them, of course, it's inflammation. This is just the worst it's been in a long time, et cetera, et cetera. So finally, I went to the emergency room, urgent care, whatever you want to call it, and they gave me, eventually, after me talking to many people, and I was there for 4 or 5 hours altogether, but they gave me a shot in one wrist of cortisone, which is kind of what I'd been wanting in the first place to break the cycle, because that's where it started, was in my wrists. And you can turn me off if this is boring. I'm almost done. And then I had got some muscle relaxants, just nice muscle relaxant drugs. A new generation of them, which unlike things like Valium and Xanax, doesn't seem to have any other effect. And I don't think they're addictive either, as Valium and Xanax certainly are. So yeah, way, way, way better. And a lot of it, yeah, I'm back to like 90% of normal, which is good, because as I was saying last night, I was really thinking like, oh my God, after, a couple of months of these things, is this the new normal? Is this, what I'm going to have to get used to now? I mean, I felt quite young for my age, and now all of a sudden I feel like quite old for my age, like I'd aged 20 or 30 years. I guess I'd be lucky that 20 or 30 years from now, I'm not dead. So anyway, long story cut short, and I was continuing to work through all of this. I mean, you guys saw me right up until week before last, but I could only do it in very small segments, and then I'd have to go lie down, stuff like that. So just the fact that I feel semi-normal, that literally a day after doing it, I could go climb up the hill and fix the fence where the dog was getting out, and not that it's like John Henry is a steel driving man kind of work. It was, just getting to this place, on our hill through the vegetation and, being able to get up close and work with stuff. And anyway, not important. But the important thing for me is that I feel a lot more normal and can get on with the important things like reading on Sundays. So don't think that our interaction is not meaningful to me, because that was definitely one of the things I was saying. Like, if I can't even sit and hold a book and read, I'm in trouble. So that definitely helped push me toward making things happen. And anyway, so that's that. Let me think. Anything else of note? No, I think I've mentioned everything. The the dog kept escaping. The poor dog. The big dog, John. The small dog, Walter, has been always able to get out off the fenced in part of the property, but he's tiny and he never wants to go anywhere. So the most that will happen is you'll see him come up the front path when somebody comes home, and we'll go, "Oh God, are you out again?" But he never goes any farther, mainly because he weighs like 4 pounds. That could have something to do with it. He has more sense than he has size. But Johnny was getting out, and that's always a worry for a number of reasons. For one thing, because the neighbors aren't really thrilled with having a big dog charging around through their property here in our rural area. And also because he got hit by a car once many years ago, and in exactly that situation, which is why we built a fence in the first place around a part of our yard, garden, property, whatever you want to call it. So the last thing we wanted to do was to have him doing that again. So Johnny has spent several days inside, being taken out on a leash when he had to go outside, and he was the most tragic animal you ever saw. He's like me. He's a late middle-aged dog, but he really likes to get out and run. He runs. He's a big active animal. So we felt horrible, but we couldn't do anything until we could get it fixed. So anyway, so let me check in with you guys, and then we'll read. I might even finish the book tonight, although it would be quite a bit of reading. So let me check in and see who's here and who has checked in themselves. And the first is Mr. Unangst. That always makes me want to say, "Do you want me to talk?" "No, Mr. Unangst, I want you to die." Sorry, that's like an old reference. Some of you may not get that. Anyway, so Jerry, good to see you. Becca, hello, hello. Good evening, good evening. Medardo, hello, hello. And good to see you. And you will indeed hear some characters very soon. Emily, hello. And I'm glad that I'm doing better too. Thank you, everybody. I do appreciate it. Drew, I lost my focus. Not again, I hope. I'm in focus again on this end. So, but then again, that was probably comes from a few minutes back. So anyway, but hi, Drew. Thank you. I do lose my focus sometimes, but I blame a youth of dissipation. That's what I'd like to say. I blame my dissipated youth for that, rather than any technical reasons like my webcam. Emily, hello. Hello, and thank you. Oh, I already said that, didn't I? Oh, okay, sorry. Hello, Emily. Good to see you too. I think I did. If I didn't, I apologize. If I did say it, I apologize also. Kelly, hello. Hope the neck is better. Oh my God, is it ever? I mean, I literally could not. I was like this for about 2 weeks. I mean, really literally, and walking like an old man, which means like your hips are locked. And so you're kind of, everything is sort of hunched and cautious, and it was flipping. I mean, I'll get there someday. I have no illusions about that. I'll get there someday, but I wasn't really ready yet. I just wasn't. So anyway, thank you for the thing. And yes, my neck is much better. Steve, hello. Good to see you. David, all good there, says David. Okay. Oh, that must have been about when I was asking about the camera earlier. Thank you for relaying to me. This is the problem, is these things are just lined up here, these comments. And unless I literally look at them to see when they came in, I don't know what they're about, or what portion of the previous undertaking they are reactions to. Claudia, Hello, hello. Good to see you. Kristen, good to see you too. Barban, hello. Jerry needs glasses. Yeah, well, it's staring at me at least once a week is probably not helping whatever eye problems you have. I would suggest you get really dark glasses that you can wear while I'm on screen. That would be my suggestion. I wish I could too, but I think people would think I was trying to be cool. Because what I really need to do is just not see myself all the time. All right. Who else have we got here that I haven't checked with yet? Cliff. Hello. Yes, the family are well. Deborah's doing okay. We're all fine. As I mentioned, the dogs are much happier now that the fence is fixed. And I hope you and your family are doing well and that none of them have escaped and run out into the road. James, good morning. Hello, hello. Super excited by the glimpse we had the other day of the new Gemian villain, or Gemian. I lean towards Gemia as being the old Nabani name for Werensten and Kementari, which was, of course, its Elvish name. Oh God, I'm fiddling with this chin thing again. I'm gonna have to just cut this off because every time I have to look at myself, I wind up fiddling with it. But anyway, so yes, at the moment the character's name is Fecca, F-E-C-C-A, Fecca the Gemian, or Gemian. So that's all I can really tell you. It was a character I've been meaning to put in somewhere, but there wasn't really any place, and it will be a fairly short appearance. I'm pretty sure. At least in these books. But if I write more Ostenard, we probably will hear more from him. Jeremy, hello. Bought a bag of books at a book sale today. Always good. Books are good. Ilva, oh, well, I'm glad you woke up from the fever. I hope you're feeling better. It's miserable. On the other hand, it's like free psychedelics. Trying to find a positive here. Not that I'm recommending psychedelics, but it's all very trendy these days for mental health and stuff. So let's hope you get some positive advantage out of it, other than just like, wow, man, what if we were all like just atoms? Like our whole planet was like an atom in somebody's like pants leg. That kind of stuff is not really all that much use, but who knows? Anyway, the main thing is I hope you're feeling better. Because you are an important person. Ray, hello, greetings to you. Good to see you. Becky, Sunday reading, hello. Yes, I am feeling better, obviously, I'm sure. You should have seen me last Sunday. I was pathetic. So that's why that night, my Saturday night for early Sunday, when I usually do the non-American reading, or, more aimed at other things, I was in horrible shape. Not quite weeping, but not far away from it. It was no fun. Anyway, who else? Greg. Hello, Greg. Howdy. Good to see you too. And Henry Rowan Fiximer. Oh my God, there's audio captioning. I wasn't aware of it. Oh God, do I have the audio captioning on? Whatever. Let's see what happens when I press this. No, I don't know. It's all complicated. I'm still trying to learn it. I also just yesterday, before yesterday's broadcast, hooked up a new computer and found every single way that it is not a one-step process, including, starting the broadcast at 7 o'clock and having nothing happen and realizing, oh my God, I have to go back and reset all the parameters and stuff for it to broadcast to Facebook, etc., blah, blah. So it was quite an adventure. I spent a large part of the afternoon yesterday, and then actually a smallish part of the afternoon today prepping to get this so it would work right. So I'm glad at the moment that seems to be the case. Anyway, Henry, yes, you'll have to explain to me exactly, but hi. And Regina, hello, hello, hello. Good to see you. Excuse me. So I think, because I don't know how much time we have book-wise, I think I'm just going to start reading. If I run out of book, which could happen, then I'll just wrap it up for the night. But until then, I think I'm just going to read so that I'm more likely to finish than to leave just like 3 pages unread. So I'm going to go back just a little bit here. We have just been through the section where Rini and Orlando and Kabu and Fredericks and several others that we don't really know yet are escaping within the Otherland network. They're escaping from the Atasco's uh, God King Palace, I guess is what it is, because in the real world, the Atasco's private island has been attacked and the Atascos have been killed. The one significant piece of information, although we're almost at the end of the book here, so unless I was reading the second book, it wouldn't be so important. But the one significant piece of information is that Dredd and the others, Dredd and his assistant have managed to find one of the incoming connections into Otherland, and they are going to take it over and pretend to be that person. So it sets up a whodunit kind of thing of who seems like one of the party that is just now escaping from the Atasco destruction, but will actually be Dredd and Helper. Anyway, then after that, we've just started a bit where Felix Jongleur is having a conversation with the rest of the Ennead. For those of you who saw that name and didn't bother to look it up, Ennead, Ennead, that is a group in actual historical and mythological terms as the chief gods of classical Egypt, for lack of a better term. It's more complicated than that, but that's basically it. So when you first do the Ennead, he, in his virtual world, makes himself Osiris, and he has designated these identities for all the people in the Grail Brotherhood who are all rich jerks, basically. Long story cut short. So that's what's going on. So they're within the Otherland network in Jongleur / Osiris's private Egypt, having a meeting, and that's where we are. And this is Jongleur thinking. He wondered if some of the resistance to his long rule over the Grail Brotherhood might be nothing more than the craving for novelty. For all their wealth and immense personal power, the Ennead had proven themselves to possess many other quite human frailties, and it was difficult to retain patience for a project that had stretched over so many years. Perhaps he hadn't given them enough showmanship lately. He was distracted by a movement down the table. A grotesque form with the shining head of a beetle rose and coughed politely. "If we may begin?" Jongleur was again Osiris. The lord of life and death inclined his head. "First of all," the beetle man said, "it is a pleasure to be in your company once more, to be among equals." The round brown head turned to make a careful survey. Osiris could barely refrain from laughing out loud at the attempts at political dignity, seriously undercut by goggling, opaque eyes and quivering mandibles. Osiris had chosen Ricardo Clement's god persona well. The beetle, Khepera, was an aspect of the solar deity, but for all that, he was still a dung beetle, a creature that spent its life rolling little balls of shit, which described the Argentinian perfectly. "We have much to discuss today, so I will not take up time with unnecessary talk." Clement bobbed like a shopkeeping insect out of a children's book, a particularly apt simile since his immense fortune had come out of black market organ farming. "Then don't." Sekhmet shot her claws and daintily scratched her chin. "What is your business?" If the beetle had possessed recognizable facial features, the look he gave her might have been more effective. "I would like to ask the chairman for a progress report on the Sky God project." Osiris swallowed. Let me try that one again. Osiris swallowed another chuckle. The Argentinian had made himself a complete nuisance about Sky God on the grounds that it was in his own territory, offering bad advice and useless personal recommendations. Osiris had made a deliberate effort to seem grateful for all his help, though. A vote was a vote, after all. "Thanks in large part to you, Ricardo, things are going very well indeed. I expect to have an update before the meeting is over, so if you will allow me to postpone any deeper discussion until then. Of course, Chairman. The beetle man bowed and settled back into his chair. Osiris watched Ta and Horus. Ta, by the way, just so you know, is spelled P-T-A-H. Osiris watched Ta and Horus, who were very still. He suspected that the Americans were engaged in a little sidebar communication and wondered what exactly had made them so eager to push forward the date of this month's meeting. The normal business went swiftly. A consortium to be organized, the better to bypass certain UN restrictions on the transshipment of precious metals, a newly privatized power grid in West Africa to be bought at an advantageous price, a few witnesses in an Indian court case to be bribed or removed. Osiris was beginning to think he might have overestimated his American rivals. He expected good results from Colombia any time, and was considering how best to orchestrate the announcement when yellow-faced Ta abruptly stood. Before we finish, Chairman, there is one thing more. The god stiffened for a practically imperceptible moment. Yes? Last meeting, we had some conversation about the lost subject, if you recall. The one who somehow disappeared within the Grail system. Some information is developed in-house at TMX, so we thought it would be a good time for you to tell us how your own investigation of the incident is going. His smile was tight-lipped but wide. That way, the Brotherhood will be updated and we can share necessary information. So, the wire was now visible, which meant that Wells and Yakubian must think that the snare was unavoidable. Osiris let his mind run quickly through the latest developments, which were few. What was their angle? I have agents operating within the system, as you know, he said. They have made a few incomplete identifications, none of which, unfortunately, has been good enough to trigger a retrieval. It's likely that they were just spikes of statistical similarity. He turned to focus his remarks on Thoth, Sekhmet, and the rest of the Asian contingent. Osiris knew that the Asians liked personal guarantees. Still, I have every confidence. Every confidence. We will have results before too long. He turned back to Ta, spreading his hands like a father, teasing his young and overeager sons. Now, what have you to add to this? During a TMX security check, about a totally unrelated matter, as it happens, we ran into some anomalies in the access records for the Grail project. To put it simply, there has been improper access. Ta said it gravely, and was rewarded by appropriate noises of concern from around the table. Please note, I said improper rather than unauthorized. Yes, of course, you're all shocked. You should be. Our chairman will agree that the energy and resources put into protecting the integrity of the Grail project, not to mention its secrecy, have been immense and, we thought, unbeatable. Osiris remained silent. He did not like the direction this was going. For Wells to admit a security breach in his own operation, in front of the assembled elite of the Brotherhood, meant he thought he had something he could turn to his advantage. Otherwise, he would simply have buried it. The escaped subject mattered little to anyone but Osiris. This is very bad. Sobek's crocodile head thrust forward. Very bad. How could this happen? There's only one way to get access to the system, explained Ta. And that is with command permission from myself or the chairman. He sketched a gently mocking bow toward Osiris. Even those employees of mine or the chairman's who work with the project every day must still receive permission before they begin their shift, and again if they come back after logging off for a break. This permission is in the form of a perpetually changing code key generated by a sealed black box generator. There are only two. I have one. The chairman has the other. Sobek was nodding his long head up and down. The ruler of a West African nation, which he and his family had wrung dry of gold and blood for decades, he understood the concept of centralization of authority very well. Get to the point. What does this have to do with someone interfering with our project? Just as access to the system is carefully limited, so any adjustment to the system must also come with code authorization from one of the two of us. Ta was speaking carefully for the benefit of those like Sobek, whose place in the Brotherhood had less to do with technical expertise technical expertise. Bugger. Let me start that sentence again. Ta was speaking carefully for the benefit of those like Sobek, whose place in the Brotherhood had less to do with technical expertise than with available resources. If the escape of the subject was not a freak accident, then it had to have been directed. If directed, the action itself would have needed approval. The system will allow no outside modification that does not come with approval. Osiris was still mystified, but he could feel Ta moving closer to what he seemed to think was some kind of mortal blow. I think we all have the gist now, he said out loud. Perhaps you could move from the general to the specific. What exactly have you discovered? Horus now stood, golden eyes glinting. We discovered anomalies. That's what we discovered. Actions taken by two different TMX employees in the week before the subject, or whatever you want to call him, escaped. The American general had all the subtlety of a cattle stampede. Osiris decided that Wells must feel fairly confident if he was going to let his crony handle part of the attack, especially if Wells' own employees were somehow to blame. Although we can't figure out yet exactly how those two helped to drop the subject off our radar and lose him in the system, we're pretty damn confident that's what happened. There's no other explanation for the actions they took, no other discernible results, and we can't find any reason for them to have taken those actions either. Well, that's not strictly true. Actually, there was a quite good reason for them to do what they did. The Lord of Life and Death was not going to let any upstart garner the benefit of dramatic pauses. We're all fascinated, I assure you. Go on. They were both acting under coded orders from the chairman. Horus turned from the table at large to focus on Osiris. From you. Osiris remained absolutely still. Blustering would do nothing to silence the whispers or still the doubts. What are you suggesting? You tell us, Chairman. This was Ta with more than a hint of satisfaction. You tell us how a subject that you wanted in the system in the first place, although you didn't bother to share your reasons with us, was cut free and released from surveillance by coded orders that only you can generate. Yeah, said Horus, unable to resist grinding the point home. Let us know, would you? An awful lot of people have invested an awful lot of money in this project. They might want to know if you decided to make it your personal playground. Osiris could feel the shock at the table, the rising anger and unhappiness, much of it directed at himself. Even Thoth, usually placid to the point of near invisibility, was shifting in his chair. Am I to understand you are accusing me of this? Of engineering the escape of this subject? And you expect me to react to this dangerous nonsense with no evidence for it but your own words? Let's not be hasty, said Ta silkily. Osiris thought he might already be regretting the slack in Yakubian's leash. We have not formally accused you of anything. But we freely make our investigation records available to the Brotherhood, and they do raise some grave questions. He gestured, and a small glowing dot appeared before each of the participants, indicating the available files. I think the burden of proof is on you, Chairman, at least to explain how your code wound up on orders that have no other visible purpose than to facilitate the subject's escape. Underneath the permanent half-smile of his mask, Osiris employed the long pause to quickly range through the reports Wells had just made available. The details were uncomfortable. There is more here than simply concern over this subject, he said at last. He would have a far better chance if he could inject a note of the personal into things. The Americans were not terribly popular. Am I wrong in thinking that you feel my leadership is somehow lacking? He turned to the table at large. Surely you have all seen our comrades' impatience with my direction. Ta, the artificer, was the cleverest of Egypt's gods, and our own god, our own version, is equally clever. Certainly he must often feel that he could do a better job, that if he could only dislodge me, he and bold Horus could bring a certain vigor to the Brotherhood's leadership. He let his voice drop a bitter degree. He is a fool, of course. Please, Chairman, Wells sounded amused. This is rhetoric. We need answers. I am never in as much of a hurry as you are. Osiris assumed his calmest tones. However, sometimes I arrive at the same positions as you do, even if my pace brings me more slowly. This is one of those times. What are you talking about? Now Ta was the one to sound off balance. Simply this: if what you say is correct, then I do not deserve the confidence of the Brotherhood. We agree on that. Neither can the project go forward without solidarity among us. So I propose that we examine the matter as fully as we can, examining all the evidence, and then put the matter to a vote. Today, if the Brotherhood votes against me, I will step down immediately. Agreed? Horus nodded briskly. Sounds fair. Ta also agreed, but a little more slowly, sniffing for a trap. Osiris had no trap to set. He was still rather dumbfounded by the revelations of the last few minutes, but he had decided a long time ago that it was better to die with your teeth in your enemy's throat than to slink away. As yet, he had never had to do either. First, he said, while your report seems admirably thorough, I'm sure that the Brotherhood would like to hear from the two employees in person. He received nods from his other guests, which he accepted with a courtly inclination of his own masked head. You have detained them, of course. Of course. Ta was confident now, a bad sign. Osiris had half hoped that TMX's earlier in-house interrogations had been too vigorous. It was hard to convict on the evidence of dead witnesses, even with hologrammatic records. Data could be so easily manipulated these days. Not that real-time VR was immune from manipulation, but the process was much more difficult. Well, bring them in, will you? Isolated from each other, of course. And since you have brought what is tantamount to an accusation against me, you will permit me to do the interrogation, will you not? Of course, Ta agreed, but now it was his falcon-headed crony who did not seem pleased. Osiris took some small pleasure from this sign that, at some level, they still feared him, worried about his legendary craftiness. He would do his best to justify that unease. The Lord of Life and Death waved his hand, and the table vanished. The Ennead were now seated in a circle, each in his or her own throne-like chair. A moment later, two figures blinked into existence at the circle's center, one stocky and one slender, both immobile as statues. They appeared quite human, and thus seemed strangely out of place amid the avid beast faces. As befitted mortals in the land of the gods, they were only half the size of the smallest of the Ennead. "My employees, Shoemaker and Miller," said Ta. "You have all their personal details in our submission." Osiris leaned forward and extended a mummy-wrapped finger. The older-looking of the two, bearded and strongly built, twitched as though awakening from slumber. "David Shoemaker," the god intoned, "your only hope is to answer all questions with complete honesty. Is that understood?" The man's eyes widened. He had undoubtedly gone directly from his last interrogation to the blackness of enforced sleep. Waking up to this, Osiris thought, must be disorienting, to say the least. "I said, is that understood?" Where am I?" The Lord of the Two Lands gestured. The man writhed, his eyes squeezed shut and his teeth bared in a rictus of agony. After the brief burst of induced pain ended, Osiris watched the convulsing bunching of the man's muscles, knowing that the other members of the Brotherhood were also watching. It never hurt to remind them what he could do. He was a god here, with powers that the others did not possess, not even in their own domains. It never hurt to remind them. "I will try again. Your only hope is to answer all questions with complete honesty. Do you understand?" The bearded man nodded. His sim, generated by the holocell in which he was restrained, was already white-faced with dread. "Good. Please also understand that what I can do to you is not like normal pain. It will not damage your body. You will not die from it. That means I can subject you to it for as long as I like." He paused to let this sink in. "Now, you will tell us everything about the events that led up to your interfering in the normal workings of the Grail system." Through the course of the next hour, Osiris led Shoemaker through a minute examination of his and Glenn Miller's work as systems engineers on the Otherland network. Slow answers, even hesitations, while the prisoner tried to remember some small detail, were met with immediate activation of the pain reflex, which Osiris often held like an orchestral note, judging what duration should most promote quick and honest responses. Despite the continued razor slashes of agony, Shoemaker stuck to the story he had already told TMX security. By the way, I'm going to just stop for half a second and check. Both of my pictures have frozen up on this end. Somebody want to just drop me a quick thing to make sure that you can still at least hear me. If you can see me too, that would be good. And then I will continue. The last message I got was from Connie at 7:30. So can see and hear. Okay, good. Then I don't care if I can see it. All right. He, meaning Shoemaker, had received what seemed a legitimate order to modify the tracking elements that sent back data on the subject's whereabouts within the system, but had no way of knowing that the changes would eventually make tracking impossible. The order had appeared to come through legitimate management channels, although TMX security had proved afterward that the management approvals were fairly obvious forgeries, and, most critically, had contained the chairman's own inimitable authorization. The chairman, the living master of the two lands, was not pleased to hear himself indicted again. "Of course, if you were a spy within the system, you might say the very same thing. And if you had a high enough pain threshold, you might continue to say it. no matter what kind of messages I pump into your central nervous system. He frowned at the panting, shivering simulation. You might even have received some kind of post-hypnotic block or neural modification. He turned to Ta. I suppose you scanned both of these men? The yellow face smiled. It's in the records. No detectable mods. Osiris gestured again. An array of glittering metallic arms sprouted from the floor, spread-eagling the prisoner. Perhaps a more subtle approach is called for. Another gesture brought forth more jointed arms, each of these veined in transparent tubing and barbed at the end with a huge needle. I understand from your employee profile that you have an aversion to medical procedure and pharmaceuticals. Some bad experience in your childhood, perhaps. He pointed. One by one, the arms tilted down like the jaws of some strange venomous insect, the needles plunging into different soft parts of the prisoner's body. Perhaps this will help you to rethink your story, which I find woefully inadequate. The prisoner, who had been struggling to find his voice, found it. As different colored liquids began to pulse through the tubing, oozing inexorably toward him, he let loose a bone-rattling scream. As black and green stains blossomed around the needle entries and began to spread out beneath his skin, Shoemaker's ear-piercing shriek jumped to a newer, higher level of madness. Osiris shook his head. He dulled the man's ragged cries to a faint piping, then flicked the second prisoner into life. I'm not going to tell you where you are, so don't bother to ask. The god was beginning to feel quite cross. You are going to tell me things instead. Do you see your friend? The second man, whose thick black hair and high cheekbones suggested an Asian heritage, nodded, eyes wide with anticipatory terror. Well, Miller, the two of you have been very naughty fellows indeed. You have interfered with the proper functioning of the Grail Project, and worst of all, you have done so without authorization. But we were authorized, Miller shouted. Oh, Christ, why won't anyone believe us? Because it is easy to lie. Osiris spread his fingers, and Miller was suddenly surrounded by a glassy cube 3 times his height. Several of the Ennead leaned forward, spectators at an evening's entertainment. But it is not easy to lie when you are fighting to maintain your very sanity. Your records indicate you have a morbid fear of drowning. So, while you think about who put you up to this little prank, I will give you a chance to explore that fear at first hand. The cube began to fill with water. The prisoner, who must have known that his physical body was still in restraint somewhere in the telemorphic's offices, while only his mind was being tortured. The prisoner must have known, The prisoner, who must have known that his physical body was still in restraint somewhere in the telemorphic's offices, while only his mind was being tortured, but could not enjoy the distinction, began to pound on the transparent walls. We can hear you. Tell us what you know. Look, the water's already at your knees. As the brackish water rose to his waist, his chest, his neck, Miller babbled shrilly about the order he had received to turn on the thalamic splitter for what he had thought was some kind of testing. He had never imagined for a moment that the splitter was still enchained and that his action would complete the subject's release. Even as he was forced to leap to keep his mouth above water, he swore that he knew nothing beyond what he had been directed to do. The cube was filling faster. The prisoner swam in rapid dog paddle style, but each moment brought him closer to the roof of the cube and diminished the pocket of air. Osiris suppressed a sigh. This Miller's terror was so palpable it almost made him uncomfortable, but the man showed no sign of changing his story. More importantly, the Lord of Life and Death was rapidly losing the confidence of the assembled brotherhood. The cube was now completely filled. The prisoners' desperate thrashings, which had reached their peak, suddenly stopped as Miller took a great gulp of the greenish water, trying to hasten the end. A moment later, he took another. The look of frenzied panic on his face abruptly grew even more acute. No, you won't die. Your lungs will burn, you will choke, you will struggle, but you will not die. You will continue to drown as long as I wish it. Osiris could not keep the frustration out of his voice. He looked to the other prisoner, a swollen lump of blackened, pustulant flesh, now barely recognizable as human, still spiked beneath a dozen needles, still screaming through a ragged spiracle that had once been a mouth. This was all sideshow now. These men knew nothing. Sensing victory, Ta stood. If the chairman has no further questions for these two unfortunates, perhaps he would like the chance to offer an explanation to the rest of the Brotherhood. In a moment, he pretended an interest in the maddened struggles of the two TMX employees, while quickly reviewing the report Wells and Yakubian had submitted. His expert systems had been combing the material for anomalies and had compiled a short list of things that needed clarification. As the superimposed information flickered across his vision, a heaviness settled on him. The expert systems had turned up nothing but noise, discrepancies in testimony that indicated little but human sloppiness and imprecision. Everything else fitted Wells' interpretation. Within moments, control of the Brotherhood and over the Grail Project would slip from the Chief God's hands. In its cocoon of metal and expensive liquids, Felix Jongleur's real body stirred. His heart seemed to labor. Osiris, the immortal god, suddenly felt his age. His colleagues were murmuring, their patience exhausted. He scanned the report again listlessly, trying to think of something that could be done to save the situation. Adamant denial? Worthless. Delay? He himself had demanded speed, hoping to catch Wells and Yakubian, unprepared for a real showdown. He could not renege on that demand without ensuring a loss of control. Could he hold the project itself hostage? The others might have difficulty finishing it without his expertise, and most importantly, his control over the other. But an aborted Grail project did him no good, and without the resources of the Brotherhood, he could never duplicate the work that had gone into it, not in time. Desperately, he called up the actual authorizations, hoping against logic to spot something his expert systems had not. The embedded dates were correct, the authorizations for work were real, and the authorization code had clearly been generated from his own machines. Chairman, we are waiting. Ta was in a good humor. Comparatively speaking, he had all the time in the world. Just a moment. Osiris stared at the data before him, realizing absently that none of the Brotherhood could tell what he was doing, that they would only see him sitting motionless. Did they wonder if he were having some kind of breakdown? He called for some other records and compared them with the fire-bright numbers before him. Somewhere, it might have been another universe, his heart began to beat faster, like an ancient beast awakening from slumber. Even the best expert systems could make assumptions. Osiris began to laugh. Chairman? It was too perfect. He paused for a silent moment of exultation. I would like to direct the Brotherhood's attention to the code sequences in question. He waved his hand. Line after line of numbers appeared on the council chamber's nearest roof column, carved into the very stone, like the other names of power etched on the walls and doors of the Western Palace. It was appropriate. These strings of numerals were the incantations that would preserve Jongleur's most magnificent and audacious dream. Please check to make sure they are the sequences you have submitted, the sequences that authorized action. and allowed the subject's escape. Ta and Horace exchanged glances. Ibis-headed Thoth answered, "They are the same, Chairman." "Good. As you see in the report, embedded between the larger random sections are other non-random sequences. These sequences indicate the kind of order it is, the date and time, the person who authorized it, and so on. But we've already established that this code came from your own generator. You admitted it." Horace could not restrain his impatient anger. If his funeral mask had permitted it, Osiris would have grinned at him. "But you do not know all the sequences and what they import. You see, this is an authorization for action, and it did come from me, but it did not go to either of those creatures." He indicated the perpetually drowning man in the puddle of twitching slime, then turned back to Horace. "It went to you, Daniel." "What the hell are you talking about?" "All the orders generated from me carry a short sequence that indicates where they were bound. These were sent to the military arm of the Brotherhood, not to TMX. Someone has penetrated your system, Daniel. They intercepted what were probably fairly unimportant orders, likely something to do with that business in New Reno. The dates would be about right. Modified them slightly, then used the coded authorizations to issue quite different orders of their own to the TMX engineering department." That's preposterous." Horace groped in empty air, looking for a cigar on his real-life desk. Ta was a little more cautious. "But we have never known that about your authorizations, Chairman. Isn't that a little convenient?" Osiris laughed again. "Bring up all the records you want. Let us have a really good look at prior authorizations. Then tell me I'm wrong." Ta and Horace glanced at each other. At the long table in the Western Palace, they were silent, but the Lord of the Two Lands felt quite sure that conversations on the sidebar channel had suddenly become white-hot. When they finally took the vote an hour later, it was unanimous. Even Ta and Horace displayed the good grace or political savvy to vote for his retention as chairman. Osiris was well pleased. Both Americans had received heavy blows to their ambition and would be on the defensive for some time. First, their own systems had apparently been penetrated. Then they had been seen to blame that on their venerable chairman. He particularly enjoyed ordering Horace to shore up his security and to get to work locating and defining the incursion. "And while you're at it, excise those two." He indicated Miller and Shoemaker, neither of whom was now capable of making anything but bubbling noises. "I suggest a car accident. Couple of work chums on their way to some dreadful TMX morale-raising picnic. You know the sort of thing." Ta acceded with stiff grace, passing a message to his security service. The two Sims disappeared, which gave the room a far more pleasant aspect. As Kepera rose to his hind legs and began delivering the first of what promised to be a string of testimonials to the re-elected chairman, establishing to the best of his dung-rolling ability that he had never once doubted that he had been astonished by the charges, and so on. The god received a signal on a designated outside line. His priestly minion, forced to dispense with honorifics after the first few sing-song phrases, announced that Anubis had an urgent message for him. His absent attention, unnoticed by the others, Osiris received his underling's report while the beetle man droned on. His young minion seemed strangely calm, which troubled Osiris slightly. After such a triumph, Dread should have been at his strutting worst. Had he come across something in Itasco's records which had given him ideas? There was also the issue of the actual adversary, the person who had so cleverly subverted TMX security and freed Paul Jonas. That would have to be the subject of many hours of contemplation all by itself. Still, Osiris had known there was an enemy out there somewhere, and in a way was glad of it. The Americans had certainly proved an insufficient challenge. When Anubis had finished his report and signed off, Osiris raised his gauze-shrouded hand for silence. Khepera stopped, his tribute uncompleted. He stood awkwardly for a moment, then lowered himself back into his chair. Thank you, my friend, my dear friend, for those inspiring words, the god said. I will never forget them. But now I have an announcement to make. I have just received word that the Sky God project has come to a successful conclusion. The god Shu has been neutralized, along with his intimate circle, and we have possession of his system. Losses of information were negligible, and cleanup is finished. In short, a complete success. The Western Palace echoed with cheers and congratulations, some of them sincere. I think today is an auspicious day to declare that we have begun the final phase of the Grail project. He raised his other hand. The walls of the Western Palace fell away. The Ennead were now seated in the midst of an endless, twilit plain. It is only a matter of weeks our work will be completed, and the fruits of our long labor available at last. The Grail system is about to become operational. Now we have truly become gods. A red shimmer appeared along the far horizon. Osiris spread his arms as if he had summoned it into being, as in fact he had. There was a dramatic rumble of timpanis, a thundering crescendo of percussion. Rejoice, brotherhood! Our day has come. The great disk of the rising sun edged upward into the heavens, bleaching the sky, scattering gold across the plains, and bathing the hungry, upraised animal faces in fire. And that's what we're stopping. And so we do have a few pages left, but not many. But it'll have to wait until next week. You know how you never want to see freeze-framed video because you always look like somebody's either just been hit on the back of the head or has just received terrible news, or, you know, your driver's license photo or whatever. I have two different images of this now that have been watching me for the next half hour of myself looking really stupid, kind of going, staring at something in mid-expression or reading or who knows what. Anyway, I still have to figure out why this is and what this thing is doing. But I don't know. But anyway, I'm glad it didn't go away on your end, and that's all that really counts. Okay, so one way or the other, we will be doing some kind of reading next week because I've got to finish the book. So even though I will only be reading the end of Otherland, I'm pretty sure it'll be finished next early Sunday broadcast, namely the one that's 1 o'clock in the morning my time. I will read something or discuss something about Otherland or whatever during this broadcast next week before we figure out what we're going to do next. So just wanted you all to know that. So do come back next week. I will be here. We will be here. I will still be struggling with my technology, but such is life in the big city. And until then, I hope all of you will take good care of yourselves, take good care of your loved ones, your friends and neighbors, everybody around you. There's not much else to say, really. I hope you have a good week, and I will see you next week. And then we will, as I said, figure out what's coming next. So peace and ta-ta for now.